Welcome to World News TG, your trusted source for international news with speed, depth, and neutrality. We bring you a comprehensive view of the world, from wars and politics to economics and shifting global power dynamics. If you found today's report helpful, don't forget to hit the like button, share the video, and subscribe to World News TG for the latest updates from global hotspots. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a critical story that matters to you and the world.
Breaking update: Israel-Iran conflict on June 22nd to 23rd. 22-5 tensions explode as U.S. enters the fray. The Middle East on the brink of chaos. Key developments over to Dace in June 22nd. In 2025, the Israel-Iran conflict escalated dramatically. No longer confined to the two nations, the confrontation has drawn direct involvement from the United States and sent shockwaves across the Middle East. On June 22nd, the U.S. launched airstrikes on Iran's strategic nuclear facilities in Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. Cruise missiles and bunker-buster bombs inflicted significant damage on the country's uranium enrichment infrastructure. This was the first time Washington directly engaged militarily in the rapidly intensifying conflict. Iran immediately retaliated, launching 27 missiles at Israel aimed at Ben Gurion Airport, military command centers, and research facilities. Sirens blared across Tel Aviv, Haifa, and northern cities. Over 20 people were injured and several buildings damaged. Israel struck back with airstrikes on Tehran, targeting missile sites and command centers, and reportedly eliminating several senior Revolutionary Guard leaders. On June 23rd, Iran continued its counterattack. In addition to targeting Israel, it fired missiles at U.S. military bases in Iraq and Qatar. The U.S. president announced that both sides are close to reaching a ceasefire agreement, though neither Israel nor Iran has officially confirmed it. Reasons behind the escalation: Israel's military operations began on June 13th, targeting Iran's nuclear and missile capabilities. Initial strikes used drones and special forces to disable radar and missile launchers. After days of intense clashes, Israel requested U.S. intervention to expedite the campaign. The U.S. intervened after determining Iran continued dangerously advancing its uranium enrichment, and international sanctions failed to deter them. U.S. strikes not only hit nuclear facilities, but also ammunition depots and military command centers. Iran denounced the coalition's actions as a national assault and vowed a full-scale response. Allies, including Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and Iraqi militias, have been placed on high alert. Severe losses on both sides in Iran. More than 600 people were killed, including many senior officers. Key figures Saeed Izzati and Behnam Sharayeh, credited as top architects behind missile attacks on Israel, were reportedly killed. At least 3 nuclear facilities were destroyed, and hundreds of uranium enrichment centrifuges were burned or damaged. In Israel, around 24 people died, and over 240 were injured in missile attacks. Hospitals in Beersheba and Haifa sustained damage. Infrastructure in Tel Aviv and other coastal cities was temporarily disrupted. Strategic and regional impact. U.S. involvement marks a pivotal shift in the crisis. Military analysts estimate Iran's nuclear capacity will take at least 2 to 3 years to rebuild. However, strikes may provoke a violent backlash from Iran and risk wider regional escalation. One major concern is the Strait of Hormuz, global oil transport route. Iran has threatened to close the strait if attacked, which could trigger a world energy crisis and sharp spikes in oil prices. Russia and China strongly condemned the U.S. and Israeli strikes, urging an immediate ceasefire. The European Union held emergency talks to facilitate peace negotiations, but Iran refuses to negotiate while under attack. Humanitarian crisis and global response in Tehran and other major Iranian cities. Widespread blackouts, water shortages, and communications disruptions forced over 10 million residents to flee the capital. Hospitals became overwhelmed, and internet services were shut down to prevent protests and information leaks. In Israel, people have been sheltering underground, schools shut down, and public transportation halted. Many are fearful the war might spread to other nations in the region. The United Nations and the International Atomic Energy Agency have warned about possible radioactive leaks from damaged facilities. Several countries are calling for humanitarian corridors to aid civilians. In Iran, peace prospects in the Cuban, Russia-Ukraine war on June 22nd to 23rd, 2025, intense clashes, large-scale counteroffensives, and elusive peace-key development in June 22nd and 23rd, 2025. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine escalated further across multiple regions, especially in the eastern and northeastern parts of Ukraine. At the same time, Ukraine launched a bold counteroffensive directly into Russian territory, marking a significant strategic shift in a war that has lasted for over 3 years. On June 22nd, Russia carried out a large-scale airstrike targeting the cities of Chernihiv, Dnipropetrovsk, and Donetsk. Numerous missiles and drones struck both residential areas and military facilities, leaving at least 7 people dead and over 20 injured. The following day, June 23rd, the capital Kyiv was hit by a devastating 3-hour bombardment. Dozens of missiles and drones struck the city's center, destroying residential buildings, subway stations, and public infrastructure. At least 10 people were killed, including children. Several districts experienced power outages, and thousands of residents were forced into underground shelters. Meanwhile, Ukraine announced a counteroffensive in the Kursk region within Russian territory, claiming approximately 90 square kilometers and destroying several Russian supply hubs and logistics routes. This marks one of Ukraine's most extensive and impactful counterattacks since early 2025. Military analysis: Russia intensifies attacks with missiles and drones. Airstrikes on June 22nd and 23rd demonstrate Russia's strategy to increase pressure on Ukraine by targeting civilian infrastructure and spreading fear among the population. The main weapons used included short-range ballistic missiles and kamikaze drones. Although most were intercepted by Ukraine's air defense systems, several managed to hit residential zones, causing significant casualties. Ukraine shifts from defense to deep counteroffensives. Ukraine ES armed forces are transitioning from a primarily defensive posture to launching deep counteroffensives. Pushing Russian troops out of a section of the Kursk region not only has tactical significance, but also boosts morale among Ukrainian forces and supporters. Striking inside Russian territory carries symbolic weight and forces Russia to reallocate resources for domestic defense, humanitarian situation, damage, and crisis. Airstrikes have inflicted serious humanitarian consequences. In Kyiv, multiple apartment blocks and public buildings were destroyed, hundreds of people lost their homes, and tens of thousands sought refuge in underground shelters. Hospitals and emergency services were overwhelmed due to the spike in casualties. In active war zones like Donetsk, Chernihiv, and Kharkiv, residents live under constant fear. Curfews have been imposed, and schools and markets remain temporarily closed. Power and clean water supplies have been disrupted in many areas. The humanitarian and healthcare crisis continues to deepen as aid organizations struggle to access the most affected regions. Diplomatic developments amid the escalating conflict. Russia announced it is working to schedule the next round of peace talks with Ukraine. However, both sides remain firm in their positions. Russia demands Ukraine recognize the annexed territories, while Ukraine insists that Russia must withdraw its troops and restore borders to pre-2022 lines. Previous rounds of talks only limited progress, such as prisoner exchanges and humanitarian support. A temporary ceasefire remains elusive, and the date and location for the next negotiations have yet to be confirmed. Western nations continue to support Ukraine. The United Kingdom recently signed a new defense production agreement with Ukraine, pledging more advanced military equipment. Meanwhile, the European Union is holding emergency meetings to discuss increasing humanitarian and financial aid to Kyiv. Battlefield situation in other regions in the eastern regions. Tense fighting continues in Donetsk and Kharkiv. Russia is attempting to expand its security buffer zone but has made no significant territorial gains. Villages near the front lines are frequently shelled. In the Sumy region, near the Russian border, Moscow launched an offensive in early June, seizing a few small locations. However, Ukrainian forces have mounted strong resistance. In the south, areas like Kherson and Zaporizhia remain largely unchanged. Skirmishes and artillery exchanges continue, but neither side has made major advances. Outlook 1. The war is expected to remain tense for at least several more weeks. Russia shows no sign of halting its airstrikes, while Ukraine is determined to expand its counteroffensives. 2. The next round of peace talks may take place in July, but reaching a ceasefire appears unlikely unless both sides adjust their positions. 3. International support will be crucial. Continued Western military, logistical, and financial aid will help Ukraine sustain its defense and pressure. Russia negotiations. 4. The humanitarian crisis is worsening. If hostilities persist, major cities like Kyiv, Kharkiv, and Dnipro may face severe shortages of electricity, clean water, and medical supplies in the coming weeks. 5. Global conflicts may complicate the situation. New crises elsewhere, such as in the Middle East, could divert international attention and resources away from Ukraine. Conclusion: the fighting between Russia and Ukraine on June 22nd and 23rd, 2025, marks a turning point with higher intensity, more severe losses, and greater risks of escalation. Despite ongoing diplomatic efforts, the political and military realities suggest that peace remains a distant prospect. In the near future, both sides are likely to either escalate the conflict or maintain their current standoff, depending on strategic calculations, foreign support, and the success of negotiations.
Thanks for watching. See you in the next edition of World News TG, connecting you to the world with facts, insight, and clarity.